In this video, we're going to talk about visual filters in Logos, when to use them, when not to use them, and most importantly, I guess, what are they and are they useful? So let's get into it. Hi, I'm Daryl from Biblical Mastery Academy, here to help you with the tools, habits, and systems to help you master the Greek of the New Testament so you can go deeper and richer into your studies of the scriptures and have a better understanding of the Word of God. That's what it's really all about. It's really about being transformed by the renewing of our mind as we encounter the Word of God in the original languages. That's my heart. That's what I want for you. And so let's get into it. With this particular video, we're talking about visual filters in Logos Bible software. Let's ask, first of all, what is a visual filter? And there's a sense in which a visual filter is really any filter that changes the visual appearance of your biblical text in Logos Bible software, which means things like your fact book, which puts those little underlines underneath your words or texts in the Bible. These are actually visual filters. Not only that, but your highlights function as visual filters. So in fact, do everything that drops in that drop-down menu that you find with the three dots in Logos Bible software. So let me jump over to Logos Bible software and I'll take you through a few little things that we find there to introduce you to what visual filters are and a little bit about how they work. So let's start by talking about a number of different things that qualify as visual filters according to Logos Bible software. So for instance, you can see here that I have turned on the fact book filter here, which is actually a form of a visual filter. There are a number of these that count as visual filters that you wouldn't normally think of as a visual filter. So technically a visual filter is pretty much anything that modifies your text like this. You can see here underlines. It modifies your text in such a way that it makes something stand out for a particular reason. And here you can see that the visual filter for the fact book is actually highlighting people's names or titles or things like references to who this is referring to and so on, and you can then click on these and it will take you to that reference to that particular entry in the fact book. So the fact book is actually one form of visual filter. It's really just anything that underlines words is considered by Logos as a visual filter. This also then would include things like your highlights. But so basically, in fact, if we just collapse all of this, anything you see in this list here, in fact, these three dots here are visual filters. Another one that is quite common is really just the search, right? So for instance, if I open up a search here and I do a search for, say, woman and hit enter, you can see here that we've got a highlight here for the word woman where that turns up in this context. This is another form of visual filter. And the idea here is that it's really filtering out the text so you can see every instance of this particular form. However, when most people, I think anyway, when you think of the term visual filter, most people will associate it with this document here, which we find here, visual filter. And so when we click on visual filter here, this gives you the ability to create a filter of pretty much anything in the Bible. So if I was to take the word woman here and I could type that in, give it a sort of sense of formatting, blue, and you'd see then, and if I give that a title for the moment just to work with it, and then I come up here and I close down that and I turn visual filters on, and you'll see underneath this then that I've got a whole bunch of them. I'm just going to turn all of these off except for the one I just created, temp VS. And you can see now that woman is in blue because that's what I've set it to do here on the other side. And so I can change that to green and you'll see that it flows over to this side as well. Let me just turn off notes and highlights just so that we can focus on just what we're seeing in visual filters. So visual filters are really just a way, this form of creating your own visual filter is a way of making text really stand out from, the text that surrounds it. There are a number of ways we can do this. Obviously, within the program settings itself, there is the red letter edition. You can come into the down here, choose program settings, and in the program settings, you can find red letters, text display, showed red letter. I've got that turned off, but if I turn that on and then we go to say Matthew chapter 5, you can see the red letter option is turned on. but I prefer to have that turned off because every word is inspired, and so I don't like to pull those out. But that's another form of a visual filter that you can use. Now, having said all that though, let's focus on just one text. And again, I'm just using the Legacy Standard Bible here for the moment. We'll get into some Greek in just a moment. But let's have a look at Philippians chapter 4, and maybe let's just work on the word rejoice for the moment. And you can see that what happens here is in the text that this word rejoice then gets this word, gets that highlight, that filter, if you like. Okay, so now that you know that a visual filter is pretty much anything in Logos Bible software that changes the appearance of a word in your Bible text, or any other text for that matter, when would you use these? Well, let's talk a little bit about the kind of information you can surface to use in a visual filter. And before we get into the text, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe if you want more content like this. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways that we can use visual filters. So I've just cleared my visual filter here, so removed that entirely. So if you right click on anything here, any word, you can see this list here. All of these can be turned into visual filters. So for instance, let's say we want to take a look for all topical frames in Lexicon Discourse Greek grammar that particularly occur in the book of Philippians. Here we can choose copy reference, choose search, click into the field here and paste that in. And then we've got our green foreground. You can see now that everything that is a topical frame inside of this chapter now gets highlighted in our green foreground. Now, you need to understand all the different elements of what these things mean for them to be really useful. But the point I'm just trying to point out here is that it gives you quite a lot of power with what you can do with visual filters. So you can pretty much use anything, including behavioral, hortatory, this Longacre genre here of hortatory genre as a filter, for instance, to then pull out everything in this book that then becomes behavioral in its focus. We can look at commands. Let's do that. In fact, take that one, who's search, and we'll get rid of that frame there, and we'll just replace it with propositional outline command. And so now you can see here are the places where we find all of these commands explicitly given in the book of Philippians. So the point of that is just to show how powerful this really is. But let's jump over to some Greek, because really one of the reasons we're all here on this channel is because we like to work with the text of the New Testament. Okay, so now that we've looked at visual filters broadly and sort of seen how we can create our own visual filters to pull out different kinds of information, let's talk about the Greek New Testament. And what I'm going to do is show you how you can put together your own visual filters specifically for Greek using perhaps say morphological filters, and then how to use these so that you actually benefit from them. Because one of the problems with visual filters is they can easily become a crutch. What you don't want to do is you don't want to use a visual filter, for instance, to show you all the different verb forms so that you never have to pass a verb form for yourself. You want to require yourself to do the hard work of passing so that you can learn to do so naturally without having to depend on tools. However, there is a space for using visual filters while you're learning to help you start to identify those things more readily. And when you see a visual filter being used and you see a form being brought out in the Greek text, you could use that to say, here's an optative. And when you look at the optative form, you're saying, okay, how would I know that that's an optative? What are the clues that are there that makes that clear to me? But let's talk about how to use visual filters in Greek, and then we'll talk some more a little bit about some of those use cases. Now, again, I'm going to go down here and turn off my notes and highlights just to get rid of all of the possible confusing things. And I'm going to choose, I'm not going to get rid of that, visual filters, and I'm just going to come back down here and use, and you can see I've got a bunch of visual filters here related to Greek. The one that I've just created is not listed here because it doesn't relate specifically to Greek. You can see on the side here, I've said this is a Legacy Standard Bible one, but let's switch that over to the Tyndale House Greek New Testament. And now when I come over here and choose visual filters, you should see Temp VS, there it is, and we can work with that. So same thing applies here. I'm just going to click here, get rid of that, go back to here. The same filters apply because those same tags are also used in the Greek New Testament as well. So again, anything I can use here is also useful. Now, where this gets really helpful with Greek, and you can do the same with English as well, is to actually use some of these kinds of tags that indicate the nature of particular words. So I've chosen here agapetoi, which is an adjective, and if I choose, I've chosen here JVPM, which is the adjectival form of this, and if I choose search here and paste that in again, it's going to pull out just forms that match that morphological form. Now, if we just go back and we get rid of that, and then we type in here at, this gives us the signal for our morphology. So now Logos is looking for what kind of morphology do I want. So if I choose J again, it's going to say, okay, let's get all of the adjectives, J for adjectives, and you can see now it's pulled out all the adjectives. And then I can do other things with it. In this case, let's just say I want to get just the nominatives. Well, I would put that in the next field, which is our the field for the case. And you can see here the one I've chosen is not in the nominative. And you might wonder, well, why is that? Well, that's because it's classified as a vocative. And obviously, the vocative and nominative forms often are very consistent with one another. And that's what we see here with the nominative plural. So let's just work with nominatives just for the fun of it. And so you can see here now we've highlighted all of the adjectives that are in the nominative case. And it might actually be more useful to sort of understand the vocatives, but nonetheless. So of course, it's a little bit challenging trying to remember all the different morphological forms just by memory, and most of us don't have that. So if you go to morph here, you can actually choose to type them in like so with the @ symbol, and then it gives you this drop down list. Now, here you can see I've got Aramaic morphology. I actually need Greek morphology. Let's just use Logos Greek morphology, and that will then give us the ability to then choose the Logos drop-down options for this. So we can choose verb. Let's say we want to find the aorist, active, indicative forms. We don't care about the rest, and we can just hit enter, and you'll find that all the aorist, active, indicative forms are actually now highlighted green. So maybe what we want though is, rather than saying, well, we don't need all of the aorist active, what we do want is all of the forms of, let's say, the infinitive. There we go, which is an N, and we hit enter on that, and you can see now it's highlighted all of the, there's only one in this case, one infinitive that's here in this particular passage. So again, really simple to just start to filter out words that you want to have them stand out for some particular reason. Now, where this can become really useful is if you're currently working through, how do I begin to identify, let's say, aorist forms. So in this case, we can go verb, aorist, and just leave it at that. And that's going to identify for us all the aorist forms. So we can see here Sunathlesan, which we saw before, and a few others start to pop up as well, and we can start to identify them really easily. And you can notice here that we don't have the sigma alpha transformative in many of these. Some of them we do. So what you can see here is we've got participles included in this, and perhaps we don't want to include participles in this, so we can actually get quite clever with this and go question mark, which means I don't care, in this case, what voice I'm looking at. I don't really care what the mood is either, for that matter, but I want to make sure this is a finite verb. So with that, then we can actually choose first person, hold down one of the keys on your keyboard, normally the shift or command key or control key, or perhaps on Windows. I'm on a Mac. And you can choose multiple options. And you can see here now we get the square bracket with 1, 2, and 3 together. So now it's going to give us all the finite verbs. And you can see here it's taken that aorist participle out because it's not a finite verb. And so you can do funky little things like that as well. You can also exclude those things. So for instance, let's say we wanted to exclude second person indicative forms. And so you can see here now that the epoiesate here is removed from our list because it's a second person verb. So we can exclude that as well, which makes it then we can focus on maybe it's third person or just first person or both of those. So the caret indicator there, that little caret, which is the letter above the 6 on your keyboard, that is the indicator to say not second person. Okay, so you can use that to exclude things, and you can do that to say, let me show me everything except an aorist form. And perhaps we'll do again 1, 2, 3, just to say we only want the indicative forms again, or finite verb forms, and there you go. So you've got all those in there as well. So now you've got all the non-aorist finite forms too. Okay, so those are just some little tips for how to use some of these features. Where you would want to typically use these is when you're working through particular kinds of texts where you are sort of learning, say, aorist verbs, and you're just wanting to highlight them so that you can start trying to parse them perhaps. That would be a really good way. So if you don't want to actually go through and read the whole text, but you do want some parsing practice, well, this would be a great way to do it. So if you wanted to use this to practice parsing, what I would recommend here for this is a great way of doing this, is using something like this to identify exactly the forms you want to parse, and then coming over to Program Settings, and turning on Information Tooltips. So Show Information Tooltips is off. I'm going to turn that on. And then if we come back here and I put my mouse over it, you can see at the bottom of the screen here that you have the full word breakdown of this word down the bottom. So this is from akirayamai. It is a verb. It's in the imperfect tense form. It's either middle or passive, indicative, second person plural, and it means to have no opportunity, which is what the lexical meaning of the word means. Now be aware of some of those glosses, which are very contextual. You'll often want to just go look the word up if you need to do that. But more importantly, if you've learned the vocabulary already, you can use this just to give you a bit of an idea of the breakdown of the parsing, and that way you can practice your parsing. So what I recommend you do here is you just take a look at the words. You could even write them out manually if you wanted to on a piece of paper, write out your parsing for them. Once you've finished the ones you can see on the page, then you can use that. Just mouse over them, check your work, and see how you went with them. So that's a pretty cool way of using visual filters, and perhaps the most useful way of doing this as well. And again, let's say you're learning subjunctives, for instance. Well, in this case, what I would say is let's just highlight subjunctives. And we can turn off 1, 2, 3 because we don't want that. It doesn't matter at that point because subjunctives are always indicative forms. But you can see there's no obvious ones here. So we might have to go look in another book like 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where we do find a number of subjunctives. And then you can go through and start to highlight and then parse some of those verbs. So that would be a recommendation for how to use visual filters. So one of the things that this could be a really useful tool for is if you're learning a particular form, or you're not very familiar with a particular form and you just want to bring that form out. That would be where this would be really helpful, and my recommendation would be to consider using it. However, you want to be careful not to let it become a crutch. Okay, so you've seen probably what I think is one of the best use cases for visual filters, at least for somebody who's learning the biblical languages, and that is to pull out different verb forms or noun forms or adjectives or adverbs, and then be able to look at that form and be able to learn to parse it. And then of course, easily check your work as well. So using visual tooltips, you can very easily and quickly check your work. My recommendation, of course, as I mentioned in the video, was use the visual filters to pull out the different forms and then write them out or somehow parse them without using the visual tooltips first, and use the tooltips as a way of just sort of checking your work. It's very easy to mouse over things and get too much information too quickly. My recommendation generally is leave those off if you're just reading, and have a quick shortcut to turn those back on again. But be aware that using visual filters can become a crutch. Your mission is not to use these to help you understand or interpret the text, but is to really to help you learn the text, learn to read more effectively and efficiently. So I hope this has been a helpful video. If it has, hit the like button. That really helps this video get found by more people. And if you are interested in learning the New Testament and being able to read it without having to use tools like this, then check out our Getting Started course at bma.to/getstarted. It's totally free. It's just 3 basic lessons that we send to you via email, no obligation, and it will give you a bit of an overview of what's involved in learning to read the New Testament in the original languages. And if we can serve you in any way, we look forward to hearing from you down below in the comments. If you do use visual filters like the ones that we talked about in this video, then leave a comment below. Let us know the kinds of things you use it for and what you've found the most useful for. That'll be helpful not just for me, but for others who are following this video as well. And if you've gotten this far in the video, thanks so much for watching. Please leave an envelope emoji in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you and loving your comments down there as well. See you in the comments and in the next video. We'll see you there.